And that jarring cacophony tells you you're back with the Power of Three podcast. It's another of our book club episodes, and today we are entering the territory of the Fifth Doctor, Peter Davison. But you all know that. You're Doctor Who fans. I'm Kenny Smith. I'm a Doctor Who fan, and we're going to be taking a look at another exciting adventure in space and time, and in this case, it's Fear of the Dark by Trevor Baxendale. Fear of the Dark was the 57th novel in the BBC Past Doctor Adventure series. As I said, it was written by Trevor, and it was released back on the 6th of January 2003 and featured the Fifth Doctor, Nyssa and Tegan. Scary to think this was out in the 40th anniversary year. And according to TARDISfandom.com, this was only the second occurrence of this lineup. The first in the PDA range was Zeta Major, published in 1998, which we previously covered on this podcast. This was Trevor's only contribution to the PDA range, but he has written several novels for other Doctors in novel and audio ranges, many of them being 8th Doctor books, which we've covered on Pieces of 8th. So as we look at the cover, it's the Fifth Doctor in shadow. It's a picture from a snake dance, and it's in black and white, and my goodness, it's very, very dark. You cannot see much of the Doctor's face at all on his left-hand side or our right-hand side as we look at it. Most of it has been blacked out. And let's flip it over and have a look at the back cover. And it tells us, on the very edge of the galaxy lies Okoshimon, a putrefied world of legendary evil. In the year 2382, archaeologists land in Okoshimon's only moon, searching for evidence of the planet's infamous past. But when the Doctor, Tegan and Nyssa are drawn into the lunar caverns, they find more than a team of academics and help uncover much more than ancient history. Something is lying in wait, deep inside the labyrinth of caves. Something that remembers the spiral of war, pestilence and deprivation that ruined Okoshimon. Something that rejoiced in every kind of horror and destruction. An age-old terror is about to be reborn, but what is the hideous secret of the Blood Hunter? And why does Nyssa feel that her thoughts are no longer her own? Forced to confront his own worst fears, even the Doctor will be pushed to breaking point and beyond. And back to Jolly Voice. The book was also given a special reprint 10 years later, as it became part of the BBC Books 50th Anniversary collection, and was issued with a new cover featuring Peter Davison surrounded by sort of shadow, and in that shadow it looks like a star chart with lots of stars being connected and intertwined. And as we turn over and read the back cover of this one, it tells us, on a moon of the ruined planet Okoshimon, an age-old terror is about to be reborn. Something that remembers the spiral of war, pestilence and deprivation, and rejoices in it. The Fifth Doctor joins a team of archaeologists searching for evidence of the planet's infamous past, and uncovers more than just ancient history. Forced to confront his own worst fears, even the Doctor will be pushed to breaking point and beyond. There we go. That was me trying to make it sound dramatic and interesting. I don't really need to, because it is a very, very good read. It builds up beautifully, lots of darker moments, and you can actually hear this story in your mind's ear, complete with a radiophonic soundtrack. And yes, imagine something of the feel of Terminus, but with a little bit more levity to it in moments. But yeah, that kind of thing. It's dark. And we're going to bring some of it to life for you now, because courtesy of our own David Steele, here's our first reading of the day.
The Doctor caught up with Vega Jal in one of the tunnels. Several of the wall-fixed lamps had been deactivated to conserve power, and the shadows were thick. Charles appeared as a ghostly apparition, arms tightly folded, chest heaving. "Are you all right?" asked the doctor. Charles didn't seem surprised he had company. "Do I look all right?" "Well, no. That's why I followed you." "I knew you would." "You did?" Charles nodded. "I can sense these things. I sense that you are a good man, although you are not a human." The doctor slipped his hands into his pockets. "What else can you sense?" "My people enjoy a very close bond with the earth, Doctor. And by earth I mean the ground, the rock and soil we stand on, and not the planet from which humans originate." "The Vega Vinculum," said the doctor. Charles smiled. "You are familiar with both my people and my religion. You are indeed a most extraordinary man." "I find the people are often defined by their beliefs. Vegans believe in the soil, the ground, the womb of life. Our connection to the forces that govern the land around us is inextricable. We can sense things that other species cannot. You asked what I could sense here, on this moon." Charles turned, and his face passed into shadow. "I can sense the darkness, and I can sense death, and that is all." The doctor found the words quite chilling. He took a step closer. "Is that why you were afraid?" Charles let out a note of derision. "A mole man? Scared of the dark?" "I've never cared for that term. It's what humans have always called us. As you have already pointed out, I'm not human." Charles' voice dropped to a whisper. "Is that why you can sense it too? You can feel that there is something wrong here, can't you?" "Something sick in the heart of this moon. Possibly. I'd like to know what it is." Charles shook his head. "You mustn't. You mustn't. It will destroy you. Go now while you still can." "I can't," said the doctor, also in a whisper. "I can't." "You have to help me," the doctor urged. "I must know what it is that you can sense." Charles could not face him. "To know it would be to die. That is all I can tell you, Doctor." The doctor clenched his fists in frustration, walking around the Vegan so that he could look into his eyes. In the darkness of the passageway, it was difficult to see Charles at all. "There must be more." "But that's just it," replied Charles, his voice wavering with despair. "Darkness, death, nothing else." The doctor sighed. "So what do you propose to do about it?" "Leave. We should all leave. Now. Somehow, I can't see Stoker and her men agreeing to that." "Then they are doomed." "Stoker says her ship isn't due to arrive for another 2 days. You can't leave." Charles didn't reply. In the gloom, the doctor could see that he had crossed his long, thick forearms across his chest so that his splayed fingers hovered over his own shoulders. Each finger was hooked and rigid. "That is a vegan sign to ward off evil forces," noted the doctor quietly. "Something's coming, isn't it? You can sense it." The doctor whirled around, alerted by a sound he couldn't hear. The darkness, further into the tunnel, had become thicker, almost as if the shadows were gathering around them with the patience of hunters. Charles was mumbling a prayer in his own tongue. He could hardly be seen now in the darkness. The doctor turned his attention fully toward the hunting shadows, searching the blackness for sound, movement, anything. He let go of Charles and slowly moved towards the back of the tunnel. There was something there. If only he could see it properly, up close. The knot of darkness drew itself tighter. The doctor stepped closer. He reached out a hand, but he could no longer see it. "What do you think you're doing?" demanded a voice from behind him. The doctor felt the tension snap in his mind with painful force, and he whirled around just as a powerful lamp was switched on. The shadows retreated after only a moment's hesitation. The doctor was left squinting into the brilliance, raising a hand to block the worst of it. "Who's that?" "It's me, Bunny." The voice boomed down a tunnel, sounding ludicrously confident. "Is that you, Doctor? With Charles?" The doctor felt physically exhausted. "I'm glad you're here, Bunny. It's always nice to feel wanted. What's the matter? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Shine your torch down here, would you?" asked the doctor, pointing towards the back of the tunnel wall. Moments ago, it had been lost in the blackness. Now it was plainly rock. But there was something there. Bunny gave a low whistle. Well, how the heck did you find that? I don't really know, said the doctor. Perhaps I'm just lucky. It was a door, cut into the rock, tall as a man and perhaps half as wide. The doctor reached out and brushed away the cobwebs that covered it, revealing an ancient, pitted metal surface. I think you'd better fetch Stoker, he told Bunny. Tell her that your mining expedition has just become an archaeological dig after all.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. And he will be back later on to bring us a second reading from this book, as things get really, really dark. But before we get to that, we need to speak to the man who brought the book into existence. We're now going to speak to Trevor Baxendale, coming to us live and exclusive from Liverpool.
Yes, I'm Trevor Baxendale, and I wrote Fear of the Dark.
So, Trev, at this point, you had written quite a few novels for the Eighth Doctor. So how did the commission for a Fifth Doctor book come about?
Well, actually, I was always trying to pitch for the Eighth Doctor because although I enjoyed all the past Doctor adventures and missing adventures very much, I always felt that I wanted to write for the current incarnation and to take things forward, and in that respect, so I was quite happy doing that. And I think I did pitch again for the Eighth Doctor, but at that time I think they were going through the big amnesia story, and so they were looking for something else. And I think it was Justin Richards came back to me and said, well, there's nothing that fits in with the Eighth Doctor sort of timeline that we've got planned at the moment, but would you be really willing to do a past Doctor book? And so I said, yes, certainly. You know, in the absence of the Eighth Doctor, I'll certainly write for a past Doctor. So that's how I got to write for the Fifth Doctor. I can't actually remember whether or not the Fifth Doctor was suggested or whether that was just what I would prefer to do. Probably I was given a couple of doctors who they were short on in the upcoming schedules and asked if I wanted to do anything for them. So naturally I probably plumped for the Fifth Doctor because he was like a significant Doctor for me, the first Doctor that I sort of watched as a fan rather than just as a child.
Yeah, I get that entirely. Same. He was the first Doctor whose era I saw all the way through.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was in from the beginning for Tom Baker, but, you know, I was, 8 when he took over. So, you know, that was very, formative years. But I was a teenager, and Doctor Who was a very serious thing to me by the time Peter Davison came around, and I was at Longleat and all these sort of very heavily into all the fan side of stuff then. So the Fifth Doctor has always been sort of like a big landmark really in my Doctor Who journey.
Yeah. And of course you've got the lovely pairing of Nyssa and Tegan, who are so sort of, that's a shame that we never got more of them in TV, but thankfully Big Finish have given us a few outings, but to have them in book form was good.
Yes, yeah. Again, as to what point in the Fifth Doctor's timeline, I think that was purely a personal decision on my behalf, and that was just the sort of setup that I felt most comfortable with and where I thought there was a decent gap. I think, who wrote, is it Zeta Minor?
That was Simon Messingham.
Yeah, I think he did a book with the same team, and I sort of thought, yeah, that there's room there for more stuff.
Yeah, so here we go. We're set in 2382. Now, the thing that, coming back to it, I laughed at the 2382 setting because you've done that sci-fi thing of push it. If this was being made in 1982, it would have been set in year something like 2182 or whatever. It pushes it on from that contemporary period by 100 years. It doesn't change the last two numbers.
Exactly, by 100 years, yes.
It's like Warriors in the Deep 2084 and stuff like that. And I thought that was a really nice touch straight away.
Yes.
There you go. You made it. That's like the fourth word in the back cover. And it's like, yep, there we go. He absolutely knows what he's doing.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely deliberate and with that exact reason in mind.
So we've got the expedition to Akoshimon's only moon, looking for evidence of the planet's infamous past. So it's very much in that classic Doctor Who alien world. There's something mysterious going on, dark from the past. What is that mystery? And is then you go into the Quatermass and the pit territory of, we've unearthed it.
Yes. Dark caves, a small team trapped in releasing something that they really don't understand and don't want to release. It's obviously, it's of a type. It's a genre. It's very Doctor Who. I wanted to do something which I don't think had been sort of like something the Fifth Doctor had necessarily done of that kind before. And I was also, I write a little bit about this in the reprint edition, in the foreword. I wanted to take the Fifth Doctor, who in many ways was the sort of the most vulnerable Doctor up to that point. He was very young. He was quite a very genteel Doctor in many ways, whose real interest was just like idling away summer afternoons on a cricket pitch and enjoying the finer things in life in that respect. And I wanted to take him and put him in like the worst possible situation, in the darkest and deepest kind of evil, surrounded by the worst, not necessarily the worst kind of humankind, but definitely that sort of semi-mercenaries, they're not, but very corporate, very ruthless, very, very tough-living people.
Yeah, that's fair to say. The other thing also, just like reading it, is you can absolutely imagine this being made. You think of like the Earthshock caves.
Yes.
And so it's very much visual, feels like it would have been at the time.
Yes, I am absolutely 100% sure that those initial scenes in Earthshock are heavily sort of influential in the formulation of that story and the setting.
There's a lovely cheeky nod to the Monster Peladon with another mining story with Vega Jal in there.
Yes.
This Nexus.
Well, I had the miners, and it's very, very Monster Peladon setting. So I wanted this character who was a bit sort of did the sort of telepathic sensitivity type connection with the surroundings, and so I thought I would just lift that character. Is it Vega Nexus or?
Yep, Vega Nexus. Yep,
something like that. Yes, because he's a sort of very underused and forgotten sort of minor alien character from the Pertwee era, and I thought,
was that MINOR or MINER?
Ah, well, yes, very good. So I thought, yes, I'll just lift that race and do something with that. Yeah.
We meet a human party out there, and again, it's doing that thing that Russell T Davies would later come to do. Is you get, it's not just a bunch of Zrags or whatever the race are; they're actually humans. Yes. And I think that's, again, it's that relatable factor that you tap into, the fact that we can recognise these people, the fact there's somebody who's, as we later come to discover, has lost an arm, and the circumstances in which to do it, and it's all really good.
And they have families and relationships and likes and dislikes. Yes.
Yeah, and it's particularly all the messaging home and sending them, and of course these are later picked up by the group in patrol. So it is quite it's a very humanised space future, which is the thing that Russell was at pains to do, rather than just being people who only have surnames.
Yes, I think that was sort of probably quite heavily influenced by what had gone before with the Virgin books and the BBC books. Is that was very definitely an angle that needed to be taken with the greater depth that you could do with novels. Obviously, you need sort of like a real understanding of characters and human interactions and on to make them engaging.
Yeah, the mystery builds up, and then the door appears, which I just think is such a brilliant. It's almost like that's your cliffhanger, that's your dramatic moment of here we are moving around, and there's a metal door, and it opens.
Absolutely, yes. Writing those sort of scenarios for Doctor Who is largely an instinctive thing for a lot of us brought up on the programme. It's sort of like you're not even constructing it consciously in that respect. It's just the sort of beats you have to hit to write a Doctor Who story, and I think it is instinctive. You can sort of break it down and make it into a mechanical thing. But yeah, for those of us who were brought up on those weekly cliffhangers and installments, yes, you sort of like instinctively know where you've got to reach that point.
Yeah, and then of course when we go through we discover there's the lab there, and there's somebody in cryo sleep. And it's just all those wonderful things you would expect in a Doctor story, and it just brings them all together. But the thing that really gets me is the atmosphere. You can visualize it as being sort of like murky, low lit, almost like when I don't take this as an insult, say like the Borad's room. You can sort of visualize it in that kind of lighting where it's low, but there's certain bits picked out. It's that black, dark set of science equipment.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that. Yeah, I probably can't remember if I gave it that much conscious thought as to what it looked like beyond what I was describing on the page. But yeah, that's it's a forgotten vault, which is always a good thing to explore. It's very much that sort of discovering the mummy's tomb type of thing, isn't it? And excavating whatever lies within it.
Nothing good ever came out of a forgotten vault.
No.
They're forgotten for a reason. Of course, before long, there's mayhem everywhere as the Blood Hunter, as it becomes known, is set loose. So where did the idea for that come from? Just with all those tentacles slavering and tubular-like bits trying to eat people. It's not a very pleasant creature.
It's not a pleasant creature, specifically designed not to be a pleasant creature. Yeah, I needed a monster, and I needed something lurking in the tunnels, and I needed some deaths and threat. So the Blood Hunter, these were back in the days where we could be a little bit more visceral with our monsters. 2004. Fear of the Doctor. It came out after, I think, the new series had been announced. I'm
just checking, release date 6th of January 2003. So the announcement's a few months away.
Oh, a bit earlier than that, yeah, a bit earlier than that. Yeah, so it must be, where did the Blood Hunter come from? Well, I don't know. I can't remember. It was the sort of thing that would disgust me anyway, and so that's the sort of thing I tried to write for. Is what gives me the creeps? What gives me and hopefully the reader will find that as well.
I think there's an awful lot of personal enjoyment going into this because it's writing the sort of story. It feels like this is the sort of story that you'd have liked on TV for the Fifth Doctor, given that you didn't always get this kind of thing. It was starting to get a bit continuity heavy, whereas this, on the other hand, is just, there's a few references here and there in Vega Giles, pretty much as close as you get.
That's it, yes, yeah, that was a conscious decision, is not to go down the route of that sort of fan service type of thing that was becoming more and more prevalent in the series at that time. So yes, I wanted to do something that was absolutely standalone. And I also wanted to do something that was really grim. I wanted to do a proper horror story, really, as far as I could. So, the title, Fear of the Dark, everything, it's a proper horror story.
Oh, most definitely. Oh, it most definitely is. I think it's just the atmosphere of it. You do feel there's an oppressive feel to it, particularly when they're underground and you know that you've got to get back up to the surface to get to the spaceship, particularly when the rescue ship, the mining ship comes, and there's that lovely conflict there between the X's as well.
Yes, and that sort of, I think, from what I can remember when I was doing the synopsis, that sort of just arrived as a, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if they had history? Because that would be a nice sort of like bit of character conflict for them. And so when I came to write that in the book, suddenly these two became like real people. And I had great fun writing Lawrence's and Jill Stoker's sort of relationship as the director.
It feels real. The fact there's the snipey comments in there about that you often get with X's and things like that, and I thought that was quite...
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing that, yes.
Yeah. The other character who really liked Bunny Chung,
yes,
who of course is the one who was messaging home, but unfortunately, spoiler alert, Bunny doesn't make it towards the end.
Yes, yeah. The pattern there, you've got to watch out in a Baxendale novel for any nice, approachable character who's introduced early on, because they're probably going to meet with a horrible death.
How did you find writing for Nyssa and Tegan, particularly given that there's sort of elements of possession in here, with Nyssa having had her dreams and voices in her head, and obviously alluding to almost like her having almost her own version of the Mara?
Yes, well, I think that was in my mind, actually, in that Tegan had obviously had a very sort of like heavy involvement in that kind of thing herself, and so I thought it would be nice to give Nyssa her own nightmare to deal with in that respect. Also, in terms of writing for the characters, well, again, as with most of them on TV, they're so well drawn and they're so vivid in our minds, is that these people, and I do call them people, they sort of write their own dialogue as you're going through the scene and writing the scene. As I think I've mentioned before, you're almost writing it as a dictation, because you can hear how they would react or what they would say to things, and one hopes then that those characters come through strongly on the page.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the difference. Whereas when you're doing your Eighth Doctor adventures, you've got a Doctor who we didn't really have that well defined based on the TV movie at that point, in those days before Big Finish.
Yes.
And here, you've got obviously companions who nobody's heard the voice of.
Yeah, really, really difficult that was, yeah.
Whereas here, we've got the clear voices of Peter Davison, Sarah Sutton, and especially Janet Fielding, just that, hang on a minute, and stuff like that. That sounded more bad Cockney than Australian, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and obviously Tegan is always a joy to write for, because anybody who is sparkly and conflictive, like in that sort of with the Doctor, is always pleasant to write for.
Of course, the Dark itself becomes a character. I mean, that's the wonderful thing. So as the book goes on, there's death aplenty.
Yes,
but I mean, that was the thing I wasn't expecting, the sort of literal fear of the dark, because it's just such the whole concept of, I mean, that's terrifying, sort of almost like bringing shadows to life before Stephen Moffat did it with Vashta Narada. Yeah,
there is that, because there are scenes later on in the book where the shadows and the darkness is closing in on them, and their sources of light are diminishing. I think there's a scene where the Doctor and Tegan are just left with a single match or a flame, and that is sort of like growing dimmer as the darkness is getting closer and stronger. I really wanted to get that sort of sense of menace, but also that sense that in the dark, it's what you can't see that is more terrifying than what you can. That's a sort of a bit of a cliche when people say it's like what you don't know is there. Like in the first Alien film, because you never actually get to see the creature very well, it's far more scary. That's definitely something that I wanted to go for in Fear the Dark. It was the unknown, it was what you couldn't see. It was taking away that power of sight. So, yes. So what is there in the darkness? What is it that's closing in?
Yeah. I mean, as somebody who's very short-sighted, I do find that quite a scary concept. What's in the light at times, but there we go. Mentioning that, what a brilliant cover you were given, just that snake dance picture with Peter Davison, then looks like a bit of a skeleton coming in over in his left eye. It's wonderful, isn't it?
It should have been a bit more of a skeleton. I was asked for what I wanted on the cover, and I had a very specific brief for that, is that I just wanted a completely plain black monochrome image of half the Doctor's face and half of a skull. I think there was a pan horror book with a similar type of cover I distantly remember from my youth, and that's what I wanted. And the proofs I was sent for that were absolutely spot on. They were terrifying. And I couldn't wait to see the finished book. And when it arrived over the Christmas break, and I got the early proof copies, and the contrast just wasn't right on it, because the skull side of it is completely lost, apart from, as you say, that very, very subtle hint. And I was quite upset by it, actually, because I thought that this isn't how it was supposed to be, the cover, And I had some talk with the editorial team, the cover designer team on that, and they said, well, basically that's how it's come back from the printers, and it's not ideal, and if we were to correct it, it would mean basically pulping all of these and starting again, and that obviously wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So I just had to live with it, basically. But I mean, I think I've posted online quite a few times the original proof for the cover.
I've never seen that.
A lot of people say they prefer it as it is now, but have you not? Oh gosh, I wish I could find it. I'll see if I've... Yeah, I also asked at the time. I said, would it be possible to have black interior covers and black edging? You know, some books the page edges are coloured.
Yes, like quite a lot of manga books go for that. I think the Death Note
Yes,
series
that's
does
right.
that.
And I think I'd seen it on. I'm not sure when Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell came out by Susanna Clarke, but that had all black end edges on the pages as well. And I did ask, could they do that for Fear of the Dark, but I was given a very firm but polite no, because that's not the house style of books and would also cost a lot more money. So, but I think it would have looked great.
That would have just been, pretty much you're getting like a solid black block.
Yes.
For your $5.99. Wow, that sounds incredible. And of course, you got a reprint as well, which must have been a real pleasure for you to know that it was rated that well.
Total honour and a big surprise. Yeah, I was really pleased by that because that was selected to represent the Fifth Doctor's era in was it the 50th anniversary series? So I genuinely I was quite sort of touched and honoured by that because there had been a lot of very serious competition, I think, in my view. So yeah, for Fear of the Dark to get a reprint, and I had to make one or two adjustments to the text just to tone down some of the slightly more violent content. I mean, they really were minor tweaks, really, and also language. I think there's a couple of instances where I had to soften some of the terms that we used just a little to meet the modern day audience for Doctor Who.
But that's the thing, you do write for a family audience. That's the thing that I think you've always done that. There's that horror that it's akin to the horror that we grew up with. There's nothing scarier than that.
It's never overdone, and there's no swearing as such, but I think they were just extra sensitive because, you know, if parents were buying this for their 8-year-old or whatever, they wanted to make sure that there was absolutely nothing that could cause any kind of offence or controversy at all.
Absolutely. Now, something we mentioned before we started was that this book never got an audiobook. And I have found out the reason for this, which you do not know about.
I don't. I would very much like to know why I didn't get an audio.
Well, the reason why it didn't get an audiobook is because it's actually too long.
Really?
Because the word count because it's still on your standard 288 pages, but the word count is a little higher, and that would have, 275 pages in this case, but the word count would have meant to fit it onto I think it's 7 discs is the standard they do for a BBC talking book novelisation or novel reading, and it was too long for that because it was looked at and considered. So
that's very frustrating. Gosh, too long. Yeah, well, I know that the font size, the print size in that is minuscule.
Yep. Oh, it could be worse. Simon Messingham's the worst criminal for that with The Indestructible Man, where it's like, get your magnifying glass out. There's so much in that one, absolutely dense. But that's it. But then again, if you'd written less, it probably wouldn't have been the same book. Well, it definitely wouldn't have been the same book. Wouldn't have had the same atmosphere, and it's
interesting. Yeah, I wonder how far over the word count it was.
Well, I'm afraid that's why. But the book still got the reprint, and it's marvellous.
Thank you.
So how do you look back on it now, as into where it fits in the whole Baxendale bibliography and how you regard it?
I think it's in my personal top 3 of the books that I've done that I think hit the sort of mark I was aiming for, and that I was most satisfied with the end result. So Fear of the Dark, Prisoner of the Daleks, the Deadstone Memorial, I think they all, for me personally, achieved what I set out to do. And I know from feedback I've had on Fear of the Dark that it was very well received, both in its original form and in the reprint. And so that gives me a lot of satisfaction at all.
Yeah.
It's nice when I speak to people and they've got very, very fond and warm memories of that book.
Yeah, I suppose it's appealed to 2 generations of Doctor Who fans at the same time. 1 book, 2 audiences.
Yeah, I think also with Fear of the Dark as well, I think that was the first book where I started to sort of like push myself a little bit in terms of construction, characterization, and also what I laughingly call my prose writing. I did sort of consciously start trying to make it a little bit closer to a novel rather than just a sort of town stick style. Bang, bang, bang. This is what happens. And it's for that reason that I started the book in media res, where, there's the cave-in, the digging people out, the doctor's already there, the people there around them already know him. And then I've got to tell sort of like recap on how they came to be in that position after it started. It's not a new trick, but it was to me at the time. And, I wanted to sort of like stretch myself a little bit and the reader.
Yeah, well, I've just had a quick look in Goodreads there just as we speak. This has got a rating of 3.94 out of 5. And the very first review there is a 5-star review. Easily one of the scariest Doctor Who stories ever written, with such a claustrophobic, atmospheric feel throughout this adventure. Really pushes the TARDIS team to the limits. So there you go. That was Ken, not me. Whoever Ken is, well done.
That's achieved what I set out for. And
well, there you go. That's what you want to hear. So there we go. Congratulations then and now.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Trev, thank you once again for taking the time to chat with us about this one.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for that, Trevor. Now that we've talked about it, isn't it time to maybe get a little bit scared again and have a second reading from the book? And this comes from further on as Tegan faces a bit of danger, shall we say, and the Doctor isn't quite himself.
Tegan switched off the comm link and wiped her eyes roughly. The seething mass of darkness was pressing close behind her. Almost before she had thought about it, Tegan was reaching her hands clumsily over the nearest stasis tank, searching for the opening mechanism. The tank looked like a big steel bathtub with a lid, but raised on some kind of dais. There were little lights blinking on the control panels, and they made her wonder if the thing might accidentally activate itself while she was in it. Would she try and hide in there only to wake up again in 200 years? The darkness intensified, and she heard the outrage of a planet that had lost itself to evil over 1,000,000 years before. The anguish settled like a physical weight on her shoulders, and she felt faint. Then she found the latches and slid back the heavy metal lid of the tank and clambered inside. It was cold and hard and smelled of iron and rubber. She felt like she was lowering herself into a submarine's torpedo tube. Cursing the Doctor, she lay back down and with a struggle slid the lid back up and over her face. It shut with surprising ease and a solid thud. It was soundproof. All she could hear now was her own rapid breathing and the hollow beat of her heart. Right above her was a small rectangle of thick perspex. She could see the darkness outside, right above the stasis tank. She almost thought she could see the deeper, more evil shadow of the dark itself, rearing up over the tank, ready to strike. Like a snake, she thought. No, not like a snake. Like soil and dust, ready to fall down into the freshly dug grave and scatter across the lid of her coffin. More and more, thicker and thicker, until she couldn't see anything. She realised then that the torch was still on. The beam shone right up under her chin, illuminating her face for all to see through the little window. She remembered her first glimpse of Ravis Alderman's face through the little hatch, viewed from the other side. She fumbled around, her arms restricted in the confined space, and eventually squeezed the flashlight's button. The beam vanished, and darkness filled the coffin. She was holding her breath. She could see something in the blackness above her, a face staring down at her through the window. It was blood red, with mad, wide eyes full of terror and loathing. Her heart stopped for a long moment. Then she blinked and realised the crimson face was her own reflection. There were a number of little red control lights inside the tank, level with her head. The faint glow picked out her features with just enough clarity to be reflected right back at her in the dark glass above. She started to breathe again, trying to control the urge to take great, loud, gulping drags of the air. It was already hot and stuffy in here, and she felt faint again. She shut her eyes and tried to breathe deeply and evenly. Something pressed itself against the outside of the tank. She actually felt the tank move slightly, and she could sense a great weight bearing down on the lid and something smearing itself across the little window. It was pitch black inside the tank and pitch black outside, but there was something there. It was oozing across the glass like a giant slug. Any second now, that glass or plastic or whatever it was would crack. The weight would be too much. It would break, and the glass would fall in, and her face would be covered with an avalanche of worms and bugs, filling the coffin, all wriggling and burrowing into every little crevice they could find. Tegan swallowed something wet and cold at the back of her throat and almost retched before she realised it was just phlegm. She had to speak to the doctor. She had to speak to someone, anyone. Then she realised she'd left the radio outside on the edge of the tank. The doctor stopped and leant against the rock wall. He patted his face with his handkerchief and then, with great deliberation, tied a knot in one corner. "What's that for?" asked Stoker wearily. "Tegan," he said. "I won't forget her now, will I?" Stoker stared as the doctor carefully folded the handkerchief with its knot. "And what about Nyssa?" "Who?" "Your other companion, Nyssa." "Oh," said the doctor with a smile. "Yes, another knot, I think." He unfolded the hanky. "Doctor, do you want me to thump you again?" The doctor looked startled. "No." "You're sure?" Stoker balled her fist. "It might not help, but it'd make me feel better because you're really starting to spook me out. You've got to fight the dark, Doctor. Don't let it in. Don't forget your friends." The doctor straightened up. "Of course I won't forget them. I've tied 2 knots in my handkerchief. That should do the trick. Now, what will we be doing? This is impossible. I might as well give up now and take my chances with the dark. You're useless." "It's all right," he said. "I know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to simplify my thought processes, conceal what I can from the dark's mental probing. But it may mean I only have occasional moments of lucidity. If that's supposed to reassure me in any way, then it isn't working." The doctor looked hurt. "Really? I'm doing my best. Maybe your best isn't good enough." "That's a possibility, but it's all I've got. That and the fact that the dark is still after me." "What? You're talking crazy again, Doctor." "No, listen. If the dark could have killed me in the cavern, would have killed Cadwell. It's chasing me. And by that, I mean us, of course. Right now. It's trying to reach into my mind to control it, to influence it, but not actually destroy it." "Why?" "I don't know. But at least it means we've got a chance of keeping one step ahead of it." "Until?" The doctor shrugged. "Well, until it catches us, of course. And then it kills us, right?" "Well, I'm not so sure it would kill me straight away, but it'll almost certainly kill you without hesitation." "Great." "Oh, don't worry." The doctor looked Stoker in the eye, and the effect was strangely unnerving. "I won't let it come to that." Stoker ran a hand through her hair, which was damp with perspiration, despite the cold. "All right," she said, after a breath. "But what about Tegan?" The doctor looked blank. "Who?" Tegan had no idea how long she lay in that stasis tank, petrified like some stone effigy on a tomb. It could have been minutes, but it felt like hours. Staring at the blackness just above her, seeing things moving through the obsidian glass like the phantoms from someone else's nightmare. She couldn't make out any shape or detail, or even movement, but there was a sense of something being there.
Thank you once again, Dave, and he'll be back with us doing readings for next week's book as well. But which one will it be? Oh, you'll have to be here to find out. Now, let's do what we always do at this point and get a contemporary review. And this comes from Doctor Who magazine issue 328. And Fear of the Dark's actually reviewed underneath Jubilee, Rob Shearman's famous Big Finish audio. So, let's hear what Matt Michael has to say about it. Trevor Baxendale is the George A. Romero of Doctor Who novels. His last effort, Eater of Wasps, paid homage to the grisly Jeff Goldblum version of The Fly. He's at it again here, pitting a mysterious ancient evil against a group of pirates posing as archaeologists who are seeking valuable minerals on the most remote planet in the galaxy. Unfortunately, his source material is far less promising this time around, for Fear of the Dark comes across as a hybrid of the Famke Janssen movie Deep Rising and Arc of Infinity. Those unfortunate enough to be familiar with Deep Rising will recall that it features nasty monsters that are all teeth and, well, teeth that can strip a man down to the bone in an instant, qualities shared by Fear of the Dark's Blood Hunter. The initial scenes of this Blood Hunter striking without warning to depopulate the ranks of the space pirates are reasonably effective. However, like Deep Rising, the book falls apart into endless sequences of hapless extras being gruesomely slaughtered. After the shock of doting Father Bunny Chung's demise, without a doubt the novel's most savagely effective moment, particularly as he so savagely escaped death only pages before, we quickly become desensitised to the violence, and the ensuing orgy of gore becomes meaningless. Like the B-movies he is so keen to emulate, Baxendale only lets our heroes survive, and when the Doctor, Nyssa and Tegan leave in the TARDIS having saved no one but themselves, the reader feels cheated. It would only work had the author managed to convey the horrible enormity of the massacre and its effects on the leading characters. But Baxendale is no John Lucarotti, and his failure to give any significance to the astronomical body count cheapens the book and leaves his readers thinking, so what? The characterisation is no more than one would expect from a low-budget horror flick. We don't really get under the skin of any of these clichés. There is the gentle giant who wants to get back to his daughter, the embittered woman with a heart of gold, her former lover who sold out to the corporation but now doubts his own decision, etc. Even their thoughts seem to come from a writer's handbook. While Tegan thinks Nyssa has a strong scientific background, we wonder whether we're reading the words Baxendale or Bidmead. Nyssa comes out of it better than anyone else, with the author taking some time to develop the gutsier companion we've heard in the Big Finish audios, but it's nothing new. Each plot development treads like a well-worn path. Lawrence and Stoker are still secretly in love. Cadwell is not a traitor, but in fact wants to destroy the Dark. The scientist Alderman is not as innocent as he appears, and so on. By setting Fear of the Dark immediately after Arc of Infinity, Baxendale shoots himself in the foot. He spends too little time exploring Tegan's feelings about returning to a life of time travel. In addition, shadows of Arc's plot flicker in and out of the book. The Dark is a creature from beyond our universe, not bound by our physical laws, and trapped in a single chamber until its servant brings it the sustenance it needs. To manifest itself here, it fixes on the Doctor, adopting his form. Worst of all, for a book that is so proud of its horror credentials, Fear of the Dark just isn't frightening. The most chilling books scare because the author is able to put across the psychological effects the uncanny has on its victims. Sadly, we don't know or care enough about these characters to be interested by their fears. There isn't anything intrinsically bladder-loosening in reading about characters standing in the dark or being eaten by a monster. Fear of the Dark is not a dreadful book. It is, however, wholly unremarkable. Baxendale doesn't manage to make us care about his characters, and, as a result, he cannot make us care about the horrors they face. Because we can't buy into the book, it becomes as desiccated and empty as the bloodsuckers' desanguinated victims. You won't need to sleep with the lights on after this one. Bloomin' heck, Matt Michael, you did not enjoy that, did you? I'm going to respectfully disagree because I remember reading this first time around and thinking, this is good, this is dark, this is what I like. And I think that perhaps maybe Matt was having a bad day in the office. Well, he was probably working in Falkirk at the time. But no, I think it's a great read. I think it's fast, it's furious, and I do think the characters are interesting, particularly Bunny, and I would recommend it. So, yeah. We'll respectively disagree, Matt. However, let's pop over to Goodreads and see what the readers there think. We'll go with public opinion, shall we? Over on Goodreads, there's a rating of 3.94. It's had 656 ratings and 106 reviews. Of these, 29% are 5-star, 41% are 4-star, 23% are 3 stars, 4% are 2 stars, and there's less than 1% who've given it a 1-star review, so that's good. Let's have some of these reviews. 5 stars from Ken. Easily one of the scariest Doctor Who stories ever written, with such a claustrophobic atmospheric feel throughout. This adventure really pushes this TARDIS team to the limits. Set just after Tegan's return in Arc of Infinity, as the trio land on a Koshiman's only moon, whilst they join a group of scientists as they explore the dark caves. Not only is the setting dark, but the Doctor's companions also experience a tough time. Tegan is anxious about her time away from the TARDIS, while Nyssa has recurring nightmares of Traken. all three are perfectly captured, and this really felt like an extension to the televised series. As well as a very companion-driven narrative, this story also has a very strong alien threat that adds to the thrilling final act. This is easily one of the best novels to feature the Fifth Doctor. It's not surprising that this story was reprinted to represent this incarnation for the 50th anniversary of the show. There's a 5-star review from Phil. Going in, I was told that this was as close to a Doctor Who horror movie as you could get, and I think I realise why. There are plenty of horror themes to enjoy, surprisingly on the gore end of the genre. Thematic bloodletting, a hidden evil, the imagery of long dark tunnels and a dangerous creature lurking ready to pounce. The writing for this one is excellent. It flows so well and really pulls you into the story. The characterisation is perfect. You can really hear the Doctor, Tegan and Nyssa coming out of the page, and the secondary characters like Stoker and Bunny Chung are really well thought out. 5 stars from Michael Battaglia. As much as I like to mock the designers of the covers of these books, I have to give them ample credit for managing to do the unthinkable, turn boyish Fifth Doctor Peter Davison into something creepily unsettling. Whatever you might think of the contents of the book, you have to admit that it's an effective cover. Here's 4 stars from Stephen Robert Collins. This is a give you the willies, good old-fashioned, creepy, Poe-style Raven, nevermore, nevermore, rapping at my TARDIS door, came tapping at my TARDIS door, nevermore. I think he's happy. 4 stars from Julia. I'm not too familiar with the Fifth Doctor's adventures. I enjoyed this book, and it made me want to check out his seasons. This book gave me Aliens vibes. The Dark as a character was very creepy. The Doctor was very fallible in this story. And our last review here is a 4-star review from Alan, who's an ALLEN. What a dark Doctor Who novel, literally and figuratively. Like, my goodness, this actually gave me shivers along the way. Despite the lack of light and only taking place in one place, it's rather a really atmospheric story. And the deaths are gruesome. A perfect Halloween story. The readers agree with me, not you, Matt. So there we are. We're nearly out of time once more, so remember to follow us on social media at Power of 3 Pod on Twitter. We are on Blue Sky, my personal one, at Finished Scene, and we also have a Facebook page, and we'll be sharing some art and DWM illustrations and the like from this book, plus the original cover that Trevor was just talking about. So yes, plenty to find on the socials. So, time's against us as ever, and we're going to play out with a track from my favourite group. And it's something that probably couldn't be applied to this book, because this is a track from Pet Shop Boys and it's called We All Feel Better in the Dark. Although I somehow suspect that the Doctor, Tegan and Nyssa, and indeed poor old Bunny Chung wouldn't agree with that. So we'll be back very soon with another episode. Until then, I've been Kenny Smith. Bye bye.